I mean, general election campaign is well launched by the speeches tonight, and you saw the pitches that each of them are going to make. You saw Whatley hitting Cooper on crime, immigration, on taxes. That is where he wants to focus his campaign. And you saw Cooper focusing on lowering costs, making things more affordable, and reminding North Carolinians of his service to the state as Attorney General for many terms and as governor. That is the lines of the campaign that you're going to see for the next 8 months.
John, no big surprises there. Those projected winners are the ones we expected. How does this matchup play out in November?
I mean, the one thing you say, and Whatley mentioned this, is he did win very handily. We always knew that Cooper was going to win easily. It was always unclear. We expected Whatley to win, but he really did win very handily. And so the line he said is, we enter this campaign as a unified party. And that is notable. Had it been a very close election, had it been really competitive, it would have been tougher for Whatley to kind of consolidate the kind of Republican group. He now can say, we come here relatively united. Look, North Carolina is a state where Republicans have traditionally enjoyed a very modest advantage in federal elections for U.S. Senate and President. And when I say modest advantage, a few percentage points. It's been almost 2 decades since Democrats have won a Senate election. And yet Roy Cooper is about as strong of a candidate as Democrats could field. And so they see this could be the year in which they could actually win a Senate seat for Democrats for the first time in almost 2 decades.
Looking at the numbers here, and it's somewhat of a moot point because the races have already been called. Whatley, 64% of the vote, with about 35% of precincts reporting Roy Cooper 92%. So decisive victories, just to sort of tie a bow around what you were saying earlier. Let me ask you this, John. Who is more vulnerable at this point? With the understanding that things could change, especially with everything going on in Iran right now, who's more vulnerable? Roy Cooper on Irina Zarutska, crime, letting bad guys and bad gals out onto the streets, or is it Michael Whatley with respect to the cost of stuff?
I mean, voters in midterm elections always have one eye at least looking at national conditions, at the state of the economy, at voters' views of the president. And so in that sense, you're going to see Roy Cooper really lean into that. He said, if you haven't seen costs go down enough, if you're unhappy about what's happening with the Iran war, you can cast your vote for me. So certainly for a midterm election, the wind is always a little bit at the backs of the out-of-power party. That being said, North Carolina has always traditionally given Republicans a little bit of advantage in Senate elections. And so it's a very competitive election. We ought to say the North Carolina Senate race will likely be one of the deciding races to decide which party controls the Senate after the 2026 elections. North Carolina will be one of the 3 or 4 states that people will be watching.
John, it was interesting to see Michael Whatley suggest, I'm just like you. You know, my mom was a librarian, my dad was an accountant, I stand with the working class, with the working families.
I'm not surprised that Michael Whatley decided to go first to make his speech about as quickly as he could, because most of North Carolinians know Roy Cooper by now. A lot of North Carolinians do not yet know Michael Whatley. So he wanted to give his biography to really introduce himself to a lot of North Carolinians. He will have the chance to do that throughout the campaign, but he wanted to definitely say, here's who I am, here's my family, and I want to make life good for other people in North Carolina. That being said, he gave a biographical sketch. He very quickly pivoted to some very hard-hitting attacks on Roy Cooper in that way. We might have gotten our insight into why Whatley chose to give this speech in Charlotte, given the focus on the issues of crime that he wants to put the attention on. That may have been why he chose Charlotte.
The end of both of those speeches sounded like political ads. It's what we talked about. I mean, jab after jab.
This was not just let me introduce myself to the people of North Carolina and start the general election campaign. Let me not waste any time in saying here's some pretty hard-hitting attack ads. We will see those on TV screens and commercials going forward, as we've seen. But they definitely, in American politics these days, you don't want to waste any time defining your opponent. Right now, Roy Cooper has won all of these statewide elections, and he has always been successful in winning a number of unaffiliated voters and some Republicans in doing so. So it's very important for Michael Whatley to come out and say, here's some of the reasons why you might not want to vote for Roy Cooper. Very hard-hitting, but understandably so, given the way the campaigns work these days.
I wanted to ask you one final thing about this Cooper-Whatley presumed race in November now. I can remember when Roy Cooper was at the very end of his tenure in the governor's mansion, and there was talk of him potentially running for United States Senate. And the immediate criticism from the right was Hurricane Helene.
Yeah.
You guys left the West,
Yeah.
largely conservative, rural part of our state, high and dry. We didn't hear Michael Whatley say a thing about
Yeah.
Hurricane Helene just now. We have heard Roy Cooper, and we've heard some on the left say Whatley was put in charge of Hurricane Helene response. And so if there are issues that still linger, this is a Michael Whatley problem.
Yeah.
Do you say, we will approach the second anniversary of this, not long before General Election Day. Do you believe recovery in the West and ongoing efforts to get those poor folks back to the way they were before that historic storm, could that dynamic be a part of this too? Or does it sound like both candidates, in some respects, may have moved on politically?
Yeah. I mean, certainly for voters in the western part of the state that are very affected, that will be top of
Right,
mind for
right.
them. The question is whether that will be a voting distinction that they will see between Whatley and Cooper. It is notable, though, that Whatley did not choose to focus on that tonight. That being said, it was a relatively short address. He will have his opportunities going forward to roll out his ads, and he could choose to focus on the hurricane.
All right, there's another race that we're watching very closely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this one. And this is the one that you called the most fascinating race. And it is
Wow.
living up to that. Look at those numbers.
And what's interesting here is if, unlike all of us here, you have not been hitting refresh on the State Board of Elections website every, 30 seconds or so, this looked, John, the exact opposite of that maybe 15 minutes ago. I suppose that's a function of which precincts at which time are uploading their data. But your early knee-jerk reaction here, 40% reporting Sam Page 58-42 against Phil Berger.
That's notable, and it's not too early to begin to kind of see the possibilities that this could be an upset. As we've stressed, it depends on which precinct is reporting at this point. Is it a Rockingham precinct? Is it a Guilford County precinct? These things can seesaw, but that is significant. One could see with this many votes already kind of reported, you could see the possibility of this race going either way. You could even see the possibility of an upset.
Wow.
And that upset would be huge, would it not?
It'd be huge. Phil Berger is likely the most powerful and influential figure in North Carolina politics right now. To have someone who's leading the Senate possibly lose in a Senate primary shakes up all of the power dynamics in Raleigh.